During my time with Blackwater, I can say proudly, along with all the other guys that sit shoulder to shoulder with me, we never lost one client during that time of Blackwater in Iraq, and we were on the streets every single day.
This is the Just One More podcast starring Chris Jacobs and Carlos Kopszywa.
All right, everybody, welcome to episode 10 of the Just One More podcast. This is an emergency episode in light of some things that went down this past weekend involving former President Trump at a campaign rally that he had here last Saturday. Again, I am Chris Jacobs, and this is
Carlos Kopszywa.
And today we got a special guest on, a very good personal friend of mine and a hell of a human being, Mr. Mike Ramirez. So, Mike, before we kick it off, tell us kind of who you are, what you do, so we can set the stage for where this is going to go.
I appreciate y'all having me. My name is Mike Ramirez. I am a security consultant and personal and executive protection specialist. I've been in the business, if you include my Marine Corps and time working corrections, 30 years, 12 years specifically to personal protection, both on the government side and in the corporate world, 12 years specifically in the corporate world.
Very nice. And a Blackwater veteran as well.
Right.
So I salute you on that.
Appreciate it.
So you started out, small town, Kennedy, Texas, just south of where I live, where we both live now, Lavernia.
Yeah.
And you went to the Marine Corps. So why the Marine Corps, and kind of how did it shape your life in the direction you took?
If you ask my mother, she'll tell you that I always wanted to be a Marine from the time I was a young kid. Not that I wanted to join the military, not that I wanted to be a soldier or a sailor, but specifically that I wanted to be a Marine. I'm not sure exactly where that came from. Maybe they had good commercials back in the day. I know I had the posters all up in my room of the Marines, the few, the proud, the Marine type thing. But yeah, I just gravitated that way and met a man during my teen years who kind of helped start molding me and shape me and put me in that direction.
Gotcha. And what exactly did you do in the Marines as your, obviously Marines, military, Marines, Army, we're all very different in that we have different job titles, but the Marines are very specific to a certain type of direction. What did you do in the Marine Corps?
Yes, of course. So as a Marine, I went in as a security force Marine, which was only a 2-year duty tour. And then I spent the following 2 years, for a total of 4 years, as an infantry Marine assigned to 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines Weapons Company as a 0341 mortarman. But that's actually where I got my first taste of security or personal protection, even though it wasn't what we know it to be today. It wasn't called what it's called today. Back in that time, late 1900s, I'm aging myself now, 93 to 97, they called us orderlies. And so part of our duties as a security force Marine detached to a naval aircraft carrier was providing security for the ship itself, as well as the ship's captain and the fleet admiral. So anytime that the ship captain was holding captain's mask, which if you're not in the military, you wouldn't know. If you do, you do know what I'm talking about. It's giving discipline for any sailor or Marine who's done something wrong. They would request that we be there in the presence of the room, standing next to him while he handed out whatever discipline actions were going to take place. But it also went as far as to when the captain or the fleet admiral were to go to speaking engagements, dinners, things of that nature. We were tasked to go and do the advance on the site, run the routes, make sure we knew how to get there, how long it was going to take, what hazards may be along the way, know the ins and outs of the building, whether it was a restaurant or an office, in case that we had to have an emergency leave. We knew exactly where to go and how to do it. So back then we carried around a pager and a flip cell motor on a cell phone, and it was one guy, one Marine, escorted. So that's where I got my first taste of doing security. And then from there, it just progressed on with life.
I actually got a couple questions. So I actually was a master at arms in the Navy.
Okay.
Obviously, you worked probably side by side.
Worked a lot with a lot of master at arms on ship. Yes, met a lot of nice, very knowledgeable master at arms guys.
So in the Navy, you did.
I did. Believe it or not.
For your particular, I guess, position, are you selected for that as far as like the personal protection while you're in the Marines, or is that something you
It was
went out for?
so during that time, and I know it's changed, and I don't believe they have security force detachments specifically anymore. I think just infantry Marine units get tasked with doing that duty now. But during my time and during that time, it was a specific MOS, so you could put in for it, and they sent you to the school. You got the training, and it was just a 2-year duty station. So, and at that time, as a security force Marine, you either went sea duty, and that's where I got selected to go to, or got sent to bases. Most of them, the bases that security force Marines were going to be sent to, were ones that had nuclear bombs and stuff of that nature that had to be protected, and we had to have a clearance to be around them.
Yeah, so I was probably like, if I was in at the time, I obviously wasn't in like back then. but so I was in Kings Bay, Georgia. I don't know if you're, were you there?
No, but I had friends who got stationed there at Kings Bay. That's what I hear. People who went there had a miserable experience as a security force Marine, where I had a great experience going to sea duty. So yes, I have heard of.
So in
place,
pretty much as a master at arms, we were pretty much the same side by side with the Marines, same jobs and everything like that. And yeah, it was horrible. The difference with us is we got to go home every day. They had to stay down there for like 2 weeks.
That's right.
Horrible.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you got a lot of experience doing that in the military. What is your experience on the civilian side of things, and how did this carry over?
So it carried over as in the fashion where I, like I said, did security force Marine, had sea duty for 2 years, went on to the infantry, deployed with them back to Okinawa, and finished my time out as a Marine. Left the Marine Corps after 4 years, came back to Texas, to the little town I grew up in, and while I was away, maximum security state prison was built. And so I went to work for them, and I spent the next 4 years or so working as a correction officer in a maximum security state prison. Spent my first year working inside, where they're locked up 23 hours a day, only come out for 1 hour of rec and in a shower. And I tell people that I did more fighting in those 4 years than I did growing up as a kid and being a Marine, if that's anything. That environment is just a wild one. And I learned a lot. I did learn a lot there, though, that I carry to this day as I continue to move forward in security and end up in the position I am today. I did about 4 years there. And when the war in Iraq kicked off in March of 2003, a few months later, I went over to Iraq as what was now known as PMCs, private military contractors. And I worked for a small company, a security company that was awarded to provide security, personal protection security for DoD contractors that were awarded the contract to rebuild the infrastructure, your water treatment places and the electric grid, since we had gone in and destroyed, completely. So I did that worked for them for a year or so, and came home, kind of reset for a little bit, and then went back to the Middle East, Iraq, under Blackwater, and was on the WIPS contract, which was a State Department contract. And our main focus was protecting the U.S. ambassador and diplomats that worked in and out of the embassy, taking them all over town to the ministries and other locations to meet with the heads of Iraqi different ministries to negotiate deals, try to work out peace, and yeah, I did that for several years, and then shifted gears and went over to another private military contracting company and started doing a little bit more of the intel, counter intel stuff, and providing protection for actual sites in Afghanistan.
You know, you had a pretty awesome write-up in CEO Magazine in talking about a mentor of yours who I have a tremendous amount of respect for. I've only met him once or twice, but he knows who I am from my dealings with the Commissioner's Court in Wilson County. But Hank Whitman, he's a former Texas Rangers chief. He was a state patrolman. You've known him since you were a teenager. How did he kind of shape the direction you went with this moving forward through your private contracting side?
Yes, Hank Whitman, his real name's Henry, but everyone knows him as Hank. Great man. He's like a father to me. Met the man when he was a rookie highway patrolman and got stationed in the small town I was growing up. I was just a teenager, and he was just different. He carried himself different. He looked sharp in his uniform. He was well put together and just very professional and kind. And I just kind of started gravitating to him, and he started taking me hunting and fishing and just giving me advice, asking me about school and what I was going to do when I graduated. And I told him I wanted to be a Marine. He had shared with me that he was a Marine prior to getting into law enforcement, and he kind of started helping me get ready for the Marine Corps. Helped me to get to a recruiter and get signed up. And then the years just went on. I went off to the Marine Corps. He continued to be a highway patrolman. I got out of the Marine Corps, and he had finished his time as a highway patrolman and become a Texas Ranger. And life just continued to roll, and he just was always there for me. Good times and bad times, always a mentor, always giving great advice. He has been a public servant his whole life, from being a highway patrolman, like we said, to the Texas Rangers, where he worked his way up the Texas Rangers and be retired as chief of the Texas Rangers. Upon retirement, he came back home. He and I continued to do security consulting together. We collaborated on some work, and we're doing really well. And he got a call asking him to go back to Austin and take charge of the adult and child protective services as commissioner. They were working through some things and needed a good leader, and knew that he could do the job. So as the public servant that he is, he went back, spent a few years doing that, got the improvements they needed, and handed the reins off and went back into retirement. Again, we continued to do consulting work together. We did some consulting work down on the border during the massive influx of unaccompanied children coming across the border several years back. And while we were down there, he gets another call from the local county that we live in, asking if he would run for county judge. And in his fashion, where he just is just in him to serve the public and do well where he knows he can help, accepted it. And of course, he ran and won. So now he is in the position of county judge in the county that we live in, and he's still serving, doing great things. And years ago, my father passed on, so he literally is like the only father I have to this day, and I love him dearly. I'd do anything for that man.
Well, he's a damn good man, and everything that I've heard about him and my interactions with him, he's been pretty incredible. Setting the stage for the topic that we want to talk about, going back to the personal protection side, obviously that's something you started doing in the 90s in the Marine Corps. Then going off, obviously you and I were in Iraq around the same time. I was there 04, 05, I was a soldier, and then 05, 06, 06, 07, 07, 08 as a defense contractor. What type of high priority clientele have you worked with and other agencies that you've worked with?
Yeah, I was there, like I said, I got there in the summer of 2003 and intended to be there about a year, do a contract, make a little money because money was good. It is what it is. And 1 year turned to 2 to 3 to 4. Before I knew it, it's been about a decade in Iraq and Afghanistan. So it was I started working for the State Department, like I told you, doing the diplomatic stuff, and then worked for some of our other agencies that do more of the intel stuff, and protected everyone from, mainly, like I said, was the main focus was the ambassadors that worked out of the embassy and the diplomats, getting them around every day. We were traveling. If we weren't traveling, then we were training. But it was on a regular basis that we were traveling the roads, whether by vehicle or by helicopter, to get them to the locations. And there was a lot of factors that went into whether it was going to be a vehicle movement or an air movement. But during that time, we were also tasked on a regular basis to protect former presidents, heads of state, other foreign dignitaries that would come into those combat zones, senators and congressmen, presidential candidates that were going to visit the troops, the occasional singer or movie star as well.
I'm sure you saw your fair share of Toby Keith.
Yeah, we did. He was a great supporter of the troops, and he was actually a good one to protect. They weren't all so kind and
Really?
thankful. That's for another story, I guess. And then on the civilian side, on the corporate side, I've protected ultra high net worth families, heads of companies, CEOs, board of directors, royal families.
Foreigners or like people from U.S. or people from like Saudi Arabia or something like that?
Although the royal family wasn't from the U.S. Other than that, they Americans that I've had the opportunity to protect and provide security for. And there's always been different reasons. Some of them, it's because the time we're living in now, our company required that they now have personal protection when traveling. Others are because something has happened along the way, and so now they feel the need to provide that protection for the leaders of their company and the high net worth individuals, maybe because of their political beliefs or maybe a product they're producing that, someone doesn't like. And others were just being proactive and wanting to make sure that their kids were safe, that their wives were safe or their husbands were safe when traveling, whether it's in the U.S. or internationally. They all have different reasons, and no one security plan works across the board. Right. You have to tailor it to each one of the individials.
And you have some experience in escorting like the president, Joe Biden, and his delegate detail. Dig into kind of your time working in Iraq with local leaders and U.S. ambassadors. That was a lot of that 2005 to 2009. There was a big shift in how protection details were run. I remember, coming in from Doha to Cedar 2 running escorts, and we used to do it in SUVs and F-250s. And then we shifted gears to Hiluxes, stuff like that, because you couldn't, the enemy, so to speak, kind of caught on to how you were escorting. So you wanted to we would get up at full garb, kiafas, everything, and to make us look like we were part of the crowd. How did that change your entire training mode, converting from that when you were taking high profile individuals and delegates all over Iraq?
You're exactly right. And that's a great question. And a lot of people don't understand that. We were at war and in country so long that the tactics had to continually be changed. In the early years, like you spoke of, we were working for the State Department. We were running, up-armored Suburbans with up-armored Humvees leading and trailing behind us with guys with heavy guns sticking out the top of them and little bird helicopters flying above us. We didn't stop for no one. We, go against traffic. We called it gap flow. You never wanted to be sitting still in traffic. That was a bad place to be. But then throughout the years, the terrorists started changing their tactics. They'd hear us coming a mile away with the sirens going and seeing the little birds going. So it would give them time to set up. So we had to start changing tactics. And as you said, we started incorporating, one, using helicopters to get from one place to another sometimes. And then also we incorporated for the State Department what we call low profile escort and protection. And I was actually on the team that was tasked to create SOPs for the State Department on how to travel in a low profile status. And a low profile status is exactly what you just said a few minutes ago, using vehicles that are of the kind that are in that area, dressing in the attire that people in that area are dressed in, concealing our weapons, making sure the client was dressed, somewhat concealed as well. And it was a smaller team, no escorts, no Humvees, and you had to just maneuver along and try to, get through blending in. That was what we did because, instead it went from having the tactics of from the bad guys of hearing us coming in a high profile status and doing L-shaped ambushes or planting IEDs in dead animals on the side of the road. So that's why it became important to figure out another way and another tactic, and we developed standard operating procedures to travel in what's known as a low profile status. And it helped, but we had to continually redefine and come up with new tactics with every attack that came about. You do after action reports, lessons learned, what went wrong, what can we do better, what worked. So yes, it was quite the change from the beginning of the war till, the end.
Yeah, that's crazy. A lot of stuff that goes on that people don't see, like civilians who never been associated with the military, anything like that. Like we see in a movie, like this, your life sounds like a movie to most people. But
Yeah.
One of the biggest things that when it comes to personal protection, what are some of the challenges you face in the country and outside of the country? What are some of the biggest things that you come across?
Every day there's a new challenge for sure in that environment. Getting across to the client the importance of following the security protocols that we put in place, specifically for them, and the severity of what happens if they're not followed to the T was an everyday struggle. You had some diplomats that were just like, hey, y'all are my security. You tell me exactly what you want, when you want, how you want, and I will do it. And then you had others that were of the mindset, oh, if we're just nice and kind and diplomatic to them, they won't hurt us. And unfortunately,
They don't care.
they don't care. And that wasn't the case. So that was always an everyday challenge being there. Another thing was the level of security and getting them comfortable with, wearing body armor. They're used to being diplomats and ambassadors in non-combat zones where they wear a nice suit, nice dress shoes, whether it's the men or the women. And now you're asking them to put on this heavy body armor. It's 100+ degrees, up to 120 on any given day, and they're not comfortable. So getting them to understand, that we were there to get them to wherever they needed to get, accomplish what they needed to accomplish, and get them back safely to the embassy on the green zone. But if an attack was imminent, that took priority, and we're going to leave now, even though we're only 30 minutes into a 2-hour meeting that you had planned. It's over, it's done. Now the importance is getting you back alive and unhurt so that we can have this meeting another day.
That was our biggest struggle, I think, coming in out of Doha and Eric John into Cedar too, is you're working with people that you can even call it a level of privilege, and they don't understand that my number one priority is your safety, no matter how I got to establish that. You can get up a black eye, bloody nose, it don't matter. We're getting you where we need to go. And they just didn't want to understand that. And that was our biggest obstacle, was working with them to understand, look, you are my biggest headache. It's not the enemy that we've trained day in and day out to defend you against. It's you. So if you're not capable or willing to work with us to establish an SOP that gets you where you need to go, then this is going to be a rough ride for you. And getting them to understand that. I think as the war went on and, my time came out of that, I left there and ended up going back into the transportation side. And it was like, you could see the shift because the rules of engagement changed. Before my first year as a defense contractor, the rules of engagement were very simple. You do whatever you got to do to get wherever you need to go.
Well, you're exactly right.
It was 2007. And the surge happened, everything changed in 2008. Rules of engagement changed. You could not shoot unless you could identify, not just be shot at, but identify who was actually shooting at you. No more suppressive fire over crowds, because that was a good tactic that we used. We laid out some suppressive fire with a 240 Bravo or something, or a 249, and everybody that does it, they weren't the bad guy. The bad guy was the one running, and that's the one that you engaged. So going into that side of it, you're more on the private security consultant state side, more so now. Tell us about that and kind of how that has evolved over your time going from out of country to now in country more often than not.
Sure. Just to add a little bit to what you were saying, and you nailed it perfectly. As a private military contractor working for the State Department, providing protection for diplomats and ambassadors, unlike the military, we weren't there to do offensive operations and track down bad guys. Our job was solely to protect the person we were assigned to. So every gun battle that we got into, we didn't have the luxury of firing the first round. We were always fired upon first, or the IED goes off, or mortars come in, and that's what kicks it off, and usually followed by gunfire, and we had to return the fire and change the circumstances and gain control of the situation by whatever means to do our job, protect this client, and get back. And in saying that, very thankful, only by the grace of God and His hand looking after us. All the other guys that sit shoulder to shoulder with me, we never lost one client during that time of Blackwater in Iraq, and we were on the streets every single day. Not even the Secret Service can say they've never lost a person. But yes, so to continue on in your question, I took all those skills and my time in Iraq and Afghanistan, brought them back stateside, continued to work on the government side for a few more years on a DoD surveillance, counter surveillance team, and continued my travel around the world, but not in the Middle East anymore, tracking down people of interest to our government. Unfortunately, a lot of them were our own military and DoD contractors who had clearances on special programs, who some, for whatever reason, usually money driven, were trying to sell our secrets to our enemies, and we'd have to surveil them, gather the information, and then let the government do whatever they were going to do with those people.
So that actually happens pretty often?
It happens more than you know, and it's unfortunate and it's sad, but it happens.
Wow.
So after doing that, I decided I was ready to transition to the private side. And fortunately for me, I had a lot of friends who had worked with me on the government side who had made the transition and were already working for corporations or high net worth families, and helped me get established, laid out what needed to be done, get the right licensings, insurance, and be legitimate so that I could make the transition myself. And I've been very fortunate to make a good living doing it. Like I said, both working for civilian security firms, international firms, and working directly for clients for their families, or for their family office, in providing services. And in the world we live in today, 20 years ago, it was very limited. Your civilian people who wanted or required this type of security, close personal protective security. But things have changed so much. If they had the means and the way to do it, the money, it was now being requested for a lot more. And also we saw the shift in big corporations and companies that were now requiring that of their CEO, their COO, CFO, or board directors.
Yeah, it's funny how things have obviously evolved over the last 20, 30 years with social media and the advent of everybody being able to get in contact with everybody, and that's increased that need for security. I've got several friends that still do it. Obviously, I got another friend of mine whose dad does it pretty heavily on the government side. So, a lighthearted question, then we'll dig into what we really want to talk about. Who's the coolest person? Like the neatest detail you've ever done, whether it be born dignitary, stateside. Who would you say is one of the coolest person you've established a relationship with? Or can you say?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I won't give names. I'll give you maybe the industry. I've been very blessed and fortunate to meet great people, world leaders, people with a heavy influence on decisions that get made in government and in the corporate world. It's been my honor to protect them, help give them the warm fuzzy and the safety feeling that they can go and speak at whatever engagement they have and not have to worry about their safety. I've met some good politicians and some not so good. I'll say Condoleezza Rice was a very
Condi.
Yes, she made several visits to Iraq and she's a very smart woman, very thankful and gracious for the work we do and the protection we provide for, and was just a pleasure to be around. That's on the government side. On the corporate civilian side, I'll say I had the honor of protecting a very wealthy man who loved to, he was an extremist. He flew the planes, like Red Bull type stuff. And he did Baja racing down in Mexico. So, man, to have a trail vehicle on him while he's running 100 plus miles an hour and having, using drones to keep up in the wide spaces where we couldn't, keep up with them and passing them on to the next guy. That was fun stuff.
That would have been a hell of a ride.
Yes. I also got to travel with another client, a civilian client out of New York, who traveled the world. He represented a lot of airline companies or did feedback for them, as well as credit card companies on the best way to fly and travel. So we always had a camera crew, and we would go and stay at the nicest places around the world, and travel as well as travel, on airlines, first class, everything catered to him, and he would give feedback on how their services were, and as well he did a lot of anthropology and gave money to orphanages and stuff like that, and it was great to travel with him and see the different things that he would help support around the world, but he always made it fun, so it was a great time. Enjoyed that as well.
So we're going to get into a topic. We're going to talk about the Trump assassination attempts, former President Trump in Pennsylvania here last weekend. And I want to lay out my perspective. And I think one of the things that I think people need to take away from stuff like this is that you get these people on social media that have all these theories on what happened. And we're not here. Make sure we're very clear. We're not here to establish theory. We're laying out the groundwork from my personal experience, his extensive personal experience on what we saw, training, how lack of training impacts decision-making. Adrenaline plays a role into how that training is influenced and enforced. And I go into it with a very open mind because I try not to stay on the political side. I try to fall right in the center of things and look at things from two different perspectives. And obviously there's things like this that happen that want to push people to have this fiery hot take, and that's not what we're here for. Going through my training, from the military side to personal protection side, we've always known to establish a 500-yard perimeter, regardless of where you were, because that was within range of most standard small arms rifles. Small arms meaning sniper style rifles was 308, 5.56. an AR-15 style.
Yes.
So 500 yards is always our perimeter. And a lot of these things, there's so much planning, pre-planning that goes into these campaign speeches, these locations, and understanding how every building plays a role with heights, slopes, placement, tree lines, people that are on the ground, campaign followers, security, state police, local police, Secret Service, Homeland Security. My take on what I feel like was probably one of the easiest ways to break this down was when your detail is reduced due to circumstance. Whether you're just running for president, you're not the actual president, because he's the actual president. This doesn't happen.
Correct.
This is a far more well laid out plan in terms of protecting the president of the United States, which, as it should be. Mm-hmm. This is the leader of the free world, regardless of what you think of him. My take on it is when you establish 100-yard perimeter, you have counter snipers on every single corner. You're surveying every rooftop. You're surveying every level of elevation that's higher or at level with your subject, the protected subject. How do you set yourself up to allow something like this to happen? Now, with every counter sniper operation, and I was never a sniper, but I know a lot of guys that were, everywhere you lay out, there's dead space. It's just the nature of the business. You cannot, from a counter sniper position, cover every single angle. So there is some logic in how the counter sniper reacted, because if you're coming up a slope that is behind the highest point on the backside, you're not going to see him until he pops his head up. Now, I think rules of engagement play a big role in this too, because with our advent of media and the growth of media, everything is scrutinized. I can remember being in Fallujah in 2005, 2006-ish, and a Marine Corps. We were running with 2nd Marines. We were there supporting a Paladin group. And we ran into a building, and there was a group of 2nd Marines that went into this building and cleared this building. After the 3rd floor, engaged a combatant that was technically, for all intents and purposes, unarmed. He had an AR-15 within he had an AK within 4 or 5 feet from him that we could tell he had been wounded and it had fallen. He engaged him, killed him. There was a freelance photographer with him. The story was spun. And that, I think, is what triggered the start of the rules of engagement changes. And this is where it's crazy, and civilians don't understand this. Rules of engagement are as such. You cannot fire at until you've been fired upon. Even if you see someone with a gun, and you can go to the Second Amendment, how this applies with open carry and all that. It doesn't matter. You see someone with a gun, you cannot engage them. So from the personal protection side, you have extensive experience in this. What do you see from that whole perspective that you're like, okay, this is a course correction. This is what needs to change. This is what I see. What is your perspective of what went down that day?
Wow. Yes, everything you said is correct and valid. And I don't want to be a armchair quarterback, but I'll give you some takes on what I saw and what's been shown to us on TV. And in my opinion, it starts off with the advance work that gets done before the event ever takes place. Secret Service, private military contractors on certain details, working for certain entities of the government. And even on the civilian side, we do to this day for the people that I do work for. If you're taking a client to a place, and in this case, it was a rally for former President Donald Trump, the Secret Service, I'm sure, send an advance party out there to look at lay of the land, just like you said, where the known threats, where would be the expected threats from the ground and from an elevated position, and try to mark those places and identify them and then set their perimeter accordingly. But on top of that, then there should have been a further outer ring of where would I place my counter snipers to see as many dead spaces as we can.
Right.
And I'm not sure if that took place or not, because at the end of the day, this young kid was able to get on that rooftop at a minimal distance that should have never happened and take those shots that he took on the former president, Donald Trump. So I'm not sure if it was a lack of training, just a simple mishap, or what exactly caused them to oversee that. But in saying that, again, like you said, in the day and the world times we're living in, everyone has a phone, video, and it appears by what we're seeing on TV that civilians saw this young man climbing up the building, setting up on that rooftop with a weapon, and we're trying to tell law enforcement, and things didn't move quick enough to catch it before he took those shots. And then you move into the close protection team and what we saw. Again, I don't want to just pick apart the job they did. At the end of the day, they surrounded him. They got him off the stage.
Which, by the way, if you watch it, was not easy.
No,
He was very much wanting to make a statement.
very
which,
much so.
That's a bad motherfucker right there. And again, say what you want about him. I've been around people that have been shot. I have no firsthand experience. You don't respond like that unless you're just built different.
Yeah, that's right. And you're exactly correct in saying that. But when you're on a protection detail and you're assigned to a client, your sole purpose is to get him to the point where he needs to be, to give the presentation he's supposed to be, and get him off safely. When shots get fired, you should immediately surround yourself. It should be split second time stuff. So maybe they could have been positioned a little better, not sure. But once they got to him, in my personal opinion, and the work I've done, both on the government side and in the civilian side, they left him on that stage too long. Yes, he wanted to stand up and he wanted to, show that he was fine. But at that point, that security team is in control of him, and they needed to move him immediately off what we call the X, the position where the action took place, where the shooter decided to take the shot at him. They left him on stage way too long. It is by the grace of God that he was able to get off there before that shooter could get off any more correct shots, and that counter sniper returned fire and take him out. So there's going to be some hard lessons learned here, and I hope that they do evaluate themselves honestly and figure out what they could have did better in their tactics and train more so that they can do a better job in the future.
So as of today, here's what we know in just reports that we're seeing. We know that there's a 21-year-old shooter. We know a 20-year-old shooter. We know that he had been practicing. He had been to a rifle. He was a member of a gun club with his father. So he had experience with the weapon. We know that he climbed the side of the building what we believe to be on an air conditioner. We don't believe the ladder that he purchased from Home Depot was actually used. We do know that based on direct language from the head of the Secret Service, who used to work for Coca-Cola, to just make sure you understand that, the head of the Secret Service worked for Coca-Cola. Now, she was a Secret Service agent years ago. Nonetheless, the counter sniper team that was assigned to that building, that specific building, because it was the number one threat that they found in their pre-planning, were located inside of the building. They were in the building as he was climbing up the backside.
Like in the building that
The building that he climbed on. That's coming from her interview she did yesterday. We know that at least 5 rounds were fired, 1 striking the president, which by the grace of God, the way he turned his head, I mean, because that was a kill shot. He was an ear hole.
Yes.
The response from the counter sniper team is interesting to me because I don't believe, and I'm not saying this because I know something, I'm not trying to throw conspiracy, but I don't believe they were Secret Service. I believe they were part of a Homeland Security detail. And understanding Dead Space and his reaction, he essentially, as I understand the rules of engagement, followed the rules of engagement, which is crazy to me because you see threat, kill threat. This was see threat, wait for threat to engage, then kill threat. Whether he could get on him or not, in my experience in dealing with talking to snipers and people that have been in that position, you're understanding that your range is up to 1,000 yards. And that's kind of what you're scaling. I would bet that when the AAR comes out, the after action report comes out, you're going to hear a lot of talk about, we would have never imagined he could have been that close. We were looking past him. Because if you watch, when he recorrects, the sniper, the counter, recorrects himself, when you're looking through a scope, when you're looking long range, when you try to bring it in that far, let's say you're looking 700, 800, 900 yards, you're trying to bring it to 130 yards, you got to pull off the scope and look, identify a point, come back down to the scope and realign yourself with that point. And I wonder if that was what was that split second that he pulls back and then comes back down to the rifle, was trying to realign himself. And the idea that anybody could get within 130 yards, it all comes down to the temperament of politics now, but that somebody would get that close and have the balls to get that close, knowing you're not surviving this, period.
Yeah.
It shows a level of derangement. And I think you go into watching the videos and seeing how everything broke down. My biggest question, and I would really like for you to dig into this, is the minute, obviously you have, in my experience, you have two channels. You have a main channel, you have an emergency channel. How in the hell, the minute it's announced that there is a threat, because it seems like it was a couple minutes before, he wasn't pulled off the stage then, immediately. Like, is that a lack of communication link between state police, local police, Secret Service, DHS? I mean, is that common?
I won't say it's common, but I agree with you in the fact that I think there was a lack of communication, whether they were not on the same radio frequency and getting the same information at the same time, and that's what lagged, or if it's their standing operating procedures that they were following, that until a shot is fired, they will not return fire. But I still feel with all the civilians that were saying, hey, there's somebody that looks suspect on this rooftop, police come look, that at a minimum, they should have at least addressed it, got there and either cleared the guy or confirmed it was someone trying to do harm to the former president and dealt with the situation before he was able to get shots off. But hopefully with time and investigation, we'll get the answers to that. There's so many things that are unanswered at the moment.
I think the important thing for people to understand when you're dealing in personal protection, whether you're on the civilian side or the government side, is that civilian operators, and when I say an operator, obviously Mike knows what I'm talking about, Carlos probably too. Operator meaning this is what you do for a living. You are operating, you are running high visibility or low visibility security, and your job is to eliminate a threat immediately. But the training is very different. When you're going from government training to civilian training, it's very different because the government has to operate within a certain set of rules because of perception, because of media, because of conspiracy theorists, whatever. So you're training on the civilian side, your training is far more in-depth, far more evolved because you have less, you don't have less rules to follow, but you have less, yes, you have less overwatch.
Correct.
And less bureaucracy.
Yeah.
So do you think in your time where you've worked with the Secret Service on several occasions, have you seen a decline in their training and how it's evolved over the course of the last, let's just say 10, 15 years?
You know, again, I have worked with quite a few Secret Service folks, both on the government side and in the corporate world. And I'm not sure what their current standards are, so I don't want to say too much on that. I've worked with Secret Service folks that are spot on. You know, most are were former military, special operations guys, and so they had a ton of training prior to even getting the training that they received at the Secret Service. Like you, I didn't know current Secret Service folks, and I've heard that the standards have dropped in recent years, but I can't confirm that. But looking at what transpired this weekend, you know, makes you wonder if it did or not. And if that's the case, they might want to take another hard look at that and implement some higher standard of training.
I think good.
I was going to say, or maybe just a new president.
And I think what people struggle with when looking at stuff like this is that you have to understand when you're in a high stress situation, your training essentially kicks in immediately and then it becomes muscle memory. But you have to understand that even in tactical situations, combat situations like this, it will never be perfect because your adrenaline is going 90 miles an hour. Your heart is racing. You're trying to utilize your training as the best you can, but you're also trying to be reactive because now it's no longer a proactive. It's no longer a pre-planned. It's now you're reacting to a shooting of a former president. You don't know his condition. You don't know to the extent of injuries around you. So I see a lot of people criticizing the female Secret Service agents, and understand something. That detail was handpicked by the former president. Now, I will say that I know for certain that his entire detail was not present, and that there were some contractors there, specifically Homeland Security. But understand that what you see, and you armchair quarterback it, and you sit here and say, well, they should have done that. You don't know because, first of all, you never had the balls to go do it in the first place. Second of all, you don't know what they're reacting to. You don't know how they're, they could be told, 1 minute, okay, holster your weapons, there's no threat. And then all of a sudden, whoa, potential threat. And now they're trying to unholster the weapon or not holster the weapon or go back and re-engage. So understand that this process is never going to be clean. I don't care how much training you have. You can train every single day. What you can't account for is what the enemy is going to do, what the engager is going to do, because you don't know what they're going to do because you can't be in their mind. So I think there's so much to unpack with this. And of course, over the next, and it's going to take months to really nail down what happened. But I think when the after action report comes out, I think you're going to see that there has been a shift in the training memorandi of the Secret Service. I think you see it pretty consistently across government and corporations worldwide. And we're not even going to go down the political side of it. It's just, look, we've evolved into this hyper-vigilant society that is designed to react on social media to everything you see, but understand what you see is not reality because there's so much more that goes into that. That man's alive today, not because of his Secret Service detail, but because he turned his head a quarter of an inch. That's it. And lucky for him, that counter sniper was able to get a beat on and eliminate the threat because 130 yards, we trained at 300 yards in basic training. Like that is a layup shot. So this thing it turned out about as good as it could possibly turn out considering the circumstances. And I hope that people understand moving forward as more information comes out that pre-planning is so much more important than actual reacting on the ground because pre-planning eliminates the need to react on the ground. And what those Secret Service agents did post-shot, you got to react faster. You got to cover down faster. You cannot, and this goes back to what I said earlier, bruises, broken noses, specifically a broken nose, you don't care.
Right.
They're going to survive, but you do whatever you can to get into that suburban.
I agree with you. Pre-planning and training. You have to have high standard training. You have to be, good with your weapons, knowing how to react as soon as a threat is identified. Have a plan. Have 3 plans. So if one doesn't work, the next one work. And at the minimum, you have to react immediately and get your client off the X.
Yeah. I think another thing that we touched on earlier when going into the pre-planning side of it, understanding obviously where you are, like that campaign has been planned for months. That campaign had been. So there was plenty of time to establish your perimeter. I just still can't get around, like, you have typically 2 channels. How do you not get them off the X the minute that there's talk of a threat? Like it blows my mind. It takes me back to like 1981 when Reagan was shot. It's like the way, just go watch the videos of how the Secret Service responded to that.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is a man that was shot and he basically got his ass whipped, dragging him to the ground to get him in the car. That is not what happened. And that tells me, good.
If you go back and look at that, from the time he was shot to the time his vehicle was driven off was less than 15 seconds. I want to think it was closer to 12. If you look at last Saturday's reaction,
It was only 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, it was well over a minute. I know for certain how much longer. That can't be the case.
My biggest fear is obviously this was somebody who's from our country that did this. This is opening up doors for other people, terrorists and stuff like that. They're gonna be like, oh, they're weak. we can get in pretty
Right.
easily. And it all stems from leadership. They got to start being harder on them and making sure the training is in line. And
Well, you just go back to, I don't remember what it's called, but there's always that second person that thinks they can mimic the first person. I can't remember what it's called. They use the term in law enforcement. But you look at just last night, was it last night?
Like copycats.
Copycats, yeah. Well, last night there was a man arrested right outside the RNC with an AK-47 and a mask,
really,
with a weapon and ammo in his backpack. Like, you have to understand that your threats are getting bolder, and people don't care about their lives anymore. That was one of the biggest things we fought in Iraq that I think people don't really understand, was that when you're fighting people like that, they don't care about their life. Their life, they know the minute they put the plan in motion, they're not going to survive.
Right.
They want to do as much damage as possible. And you go and you look at what happened on Saturday. That's exactly the situation. There was between 5 and 7 just pop off, one accurate shot, and you had a guy, which my thoughts and prayers to his family, was killed in the crowd covering his wife and kid. Another gentleman was wounded. I mean, those people don't care. So we have to stop empathizing with our training and caring with our training, and understand that it doesn't matter what the media says, what the civilians say, what people watching on Twitter, whatever. You do the job because your job is to put your life on the line to protect somebody else. And when the Secret Service, the elite of the elite, supposedly can't establish that, then you start to ask questions of, that's where the questions come out of. Was it an inside job? No, I don't believe it was an inside job. I don't believe that the Secret Service planned it. I don't believe the state police planned it. I believe it was just a really, really, really bad pre-plan. I think it was a really bad plan in general. I think training is the number one thing. You see these guys on social media, they train daily.
Right.
And they're not even protectors. They're just, hey, look, if I'm ever in that situation, I want to be able to, I train on my EDC, I train with my AR platforms. I mean, I'm not doing that anymore, but you just don't know.
Yeah.
And the fact that this could happen to the former president of the United States and the leading candidate for the next seat at the White House, if it can happen to him, and that's why I think corporal protection is so important now, and what you do is so admirable, because there ain't many people like you anymore. Like everybody's just sheep now. Nobody wants to be a wolf anymore. So moving forward with what you've seen, going into the personal protection side, do you apply what you saw there into your training moving forward to make sure that you look at all these things even harder as someone does what you do?
Oh, of course. With every situation that we see on television, if you're in the business that I'm in, you try to follow it and learn what the after action report looks like of what they did right, what they did wrong, how they were set up, because it can happen to us on our detail at any given time. So you try to learn from others' mistakes so that you don't end up making the same mistakes, or if they've done things that were right and maybe you're not implementing them, you take that back to your team, to your client, whomever's in charge, and say, hey, do you see this? Do you see how they reacted to this situation? What do you think about it? Is it something that would benefit us in our plan for our SOPs in protecting the client that we're on? By all means, you've got to learn, be willing to learn, you got to learn to be honest with yourself of, are we doing things right? And always willing to learn. If you think that you know it all in this business and there's nothing else for you to learn, I don't care how long you've been in the business, 3 years or 30 years, like myself, it's probably time for you to leave.
Yeah.
We always need to learn and try to improve and continue the training as often as you can. When you're not working and on your client, you should be out there training and trying to learn new things and improve your skills from how to provide a better 360 protection in the different environments, whether it's around high buildings, whether it's in an open field, at a rally. There's just so many different scenarios that you have to constantly train and learn from every situation that occurs up to that point in and around the world.
So going into back on the private side, when you're obviously training is always evolving, everything's always adapting. Do y'all ever consult with the federal government on investigative inquiries like this type of incident? I imagine there's going to be a congressional hearing. I am certain of it.
Right.
Do they bring guys like you in to testify at those type of hearings to get a bird's eye view from a third party?
They do. It won't be guys at my level.
Right.
I'm a little guy in the big picture, but they have brought in, news medias have, and I think even up to the Hill to speak. There's been guys like one of my former bosses, Eric Prince, who
I know
the founder of Blackwater, who speaks on things of that nature. So yes, you see a little bit of it.
It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out over the next, I would say, couple of months. I think obviously you've seen the uptick in security details. I think Robert Kennedy now is going to get a security detail finally. But I want people to understand that you go on the news and you watch these guys talk and you see what they have to say. This is an engagement thing that the media is going to do, that social media companies are going to do, that podcasters like us are going to do. This is a guy that does this stuff for a living. And you see, he's not jumping to conclusions. He's not trying to quarterback it because things are different. You don't know all the details, so you can't speak to what really happened. So take with what you watch on these platforms and in the news media and kind of put it in a bubble and understand that it isn't always what it seems. And there's always so much more to it. And when you get guys that are so quick to jump on, like this Marine sniper that jumped on the other day and said this was an inside job, they have no idea what the hell they're talking about in their engagement farming. That's all they're doing. True professionals, people that really and truly understand and aren't trying to make a buck off engagement, will tell you exactly like Mike just told you, that there's too many factors that play into this to sit here and say, this is it or this is it. We know pre-planning was a disaster. But outside of that, there's so much more to it. So take it with a grain of salt. And man, Mike, this was awesome. I'm so glad I got you on. I know we've been talking about this for about a month and a half or so. And obviously I'm grateful to have you in my life as a friend. And I hope to definitely have you on once the after action reports come out so we can really start making fun of some people.
Break it down. Yeah.
For sure. No, appreciate y'all having me. And I'll close on mine by saying, you don't have to be in this business that I'm in to be aware. It is important for everyone out there to be aware of your surroundings. In the world we're living in today, everyone's got their head in their phone, walking from their house to their car or from the grocery store out to their vehicle, and they're not paying attention to things around them that could be harmful. So take time, be aware of your surroundings. If you carry a weapon, that's great. If you live in a state where you can carry a weapon and you're comfortable with carrying one, carry one. Remember, with that comes great responsibility as well. So make sure you're trained and training properly on it. And if you see something that doesn't look right, say something. Do those things, and we can help one another live to see another day.
Absolutely. Carlos, you want to wrap it up?
Make America great again.
We'll edit that out.
No, but this is a great podcast. It's really insightful. A lot of things that I didn't know. And I know that, again, this whole situation with Trump has been going probably for a year, maybe longer, before they really figured out what's going down. But glad to have you here and talk about it with us and talk about your story with us. And guys, until next time, we'll talk to you later.
So next time I see you, I'll be 40, bro.
Dang, you're old.
I'll be 40. And if I survive Vegas, we'll do another episode. We'll talk about what happened in Vegas. So until then, thank y'all for tuning in to the 10th episode of the Just One More podcast. We will catch you on the next time.